Hi, Colton. Glad you're here today. Okay. All righty. This week we are going to look forward to the Baroque. We're going to go over some primary differences between the Renaissance and the Baroque. And at this point, we're going to be focusing on a lot of the European type stuff because even though we are going to touch on other aspects of art around the world, what is interesting by the time we get to the 17th century, European culture has marketed itself so well that it heavily informs a lot of the art that we see that the rest of the world is working on as well. So that's why we're going to be looking quite a bit at European stuff because they were really good self-promoters. But I want to kind of backtrack just a little bit, just cover a little bit of the stuff that we've looked at so far in this first month of classwork. And Colton, since you are here, if you have any questions, I am going to be checking on chat. So please don't hesitate to say something or make an observation, and I will do my best to get to it and see it. I don't have a real habit of looking at the chat feature, but it is there. The Renaissance goes from about 1350 to about 1600, and we're talking about both Italian and European. Last week, I had everybody look at videos that talked about what is art for, where does the meaning lie, all those kinds of things. And I want people to really pay a lot of attention using the tools of artistic critique, check out what we're looking at, and see if you can articulate similarities and differences in the material that we look at. One of the big things is I'm making a comparison between the Sistine Chapel that Michelangelo did, and this is another ceiling painting done. It's called the Triumph of Providence, and this is in Italy at the first part of the Baroque period. There's a couple things that I think really stand out to me that I hope you guys can see, and we're going to look at both the painting and the sculpture, and we're also going to be looking at the architecture as well and look at the differences. I want to watch a couple videos with you guys, and I'm hoping that the sound is good. If not, I'll just include these videos for you to watch during the attendance thing. I'll make everybody watch them, but I'm hoping that we can see both, watch both of these videos. So, Colton, since you're on here, please let me know in the chat if you can see this video. It says differences between Renaissance and Baroque art. And then I'm going to unmute it, and we're going to watch it. And please let me know if you can hear it. Okay. You can see it. Okay, good. Let me see if you, please let me know if you can hear it.
Accessible Art History YouTube channel. This week, we are going to be comparing two.
Okay, you can hear it. Okay, great. Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and make it full screen, and then we're going to go ahead and watch this, the differences between Renaissance and Baroque art. And we're also going to be watching the Smart History one, and this is about 9 minutes. So it's about 17 minutes altogether. But I do think that these are important, and then after looking at these, we're going to look at some of the artwork, and discuss the artwork that we see.
How can you look at a painting or sculpture and know that it was
Okay, Colton, are you able to see and hear that video? Okay, excellent.
made during the period that we call the Baroque?
How do you recognize the Baroque style? Let's start by looking at this very important sculpture by Bernini of the biblical story of David who defeats the giant Goliath.
I'm standing in front of the sculpture and I want to duck. This man is about to launch a rock.
He's giving this every ounce of energy he's got.
Look at his eyebrows, the way they're knit together. Look at the way that he's biting his lips. The artist is observing the human body, understands all of the naturalistic lessons that had been gained during the Renaissance, but is putting them towards an intense emotionalism.
This is a position of the body that could only be like this for a split second.
The body itself has broken with the stability that had been so characteristic of the Renaissance. Bernini's body is wound up and is about to release its energy. He's like a spring that's taut. And you're right, his body could never hold this position for more than a moment.
We see a diagonal.
And it's not just straight diagonals, these are interrelated arcing diagonals. And so there is this tremendous energy that's not only the result of the representation of his body, but it's the very forms and lines that the artist is creating in stone.
And that's part of the way that the figure involves us. It moves into our space. With Michelangelo's David, we maintain a polite distance. Its ideal beauty is there for us to contemplate. But Baroque art does something different. Instead of appealing to our minds, it appeals to our bodies.
It appeals to our emotions.
Michelangelo's David looks like a god.
Well, Michelangelo is largely unwilling to sacrifice the pure linear qualities of his figure. Notice the way in which the line of his body is almost unobstructed, whereas Bernini is absolutely willing to cross his body with his arms, with all of those diagonals that energize, but also move away from that notion of the ideal. There's another important aspect that the complexity of Bernini's composition enables, and that is a greater set of contrast between light and dark. Michelangelo's David, because he is so planar, the marble is all available to the light, and so you don't get deep shadow. With Bernini, because the form is crossing itself, you get these contrasts between highlights and shadows that further activate the sculpture.
So how do we see this in painting?
One of the great examples is to look at the Italian Baroque painter Caravaggio.
This is an amazing painting and incredibly powerful, very much like Bernini's David. We're confronted with something very close to us. Here is St. Peter, who asked to be crucified upside down because he said he wasn't worthy to die the way that Christ had died. So here we see Peter nailed to the cross. The bottom of the cross almost feels like it's so close that we could touch it. So the same way that Bernini's David moved into our space, Caravaggio is using foreshortening.
But it also creates an incredible sense of instability. Look at the way that that cross is just being raised up, and we're not sure that the massiveness of Peter and of the lumber is too heavy, whether or not he may fall with a giant thud, that everything feels contingent and in motion.
And here we have the diagonal of the cross, but also another diagonal formed by the back of the figure who's helping to raise the cross and the figure underneath who's raising it with his back. And so we have crisscrossing diagonals, which is also a very common feature of Baroque art.
It's interesting to compare this to the Bernini sculpture because Bernini was working in the round. Here, the artist is creating an illusion of form, of mass, and one of the ways he's able to do that is to create these sharp contrasts between light and shadow, which, just like the Bernini sculpture, is creating a sense of vividness and energy. So we've got this dark background and these brilliantly highlighted figures creating creating the sense of veracity that we could reach out and touch them.
The whole thing about Renaissance painting was there was an illusion of space, there was architecture, there was landscape behind the figures. But here Caravaggio gives us darkness, and everything is pushed to the foreground.
So it's emotional, it's intimate, it feels real, it feels immediate.
And it gets to us in our bodies. Look at how close Peter's feet are, and we can see the nails that have been driven through his feet. We can see the nails in his hand. There's an interest in making us emotionally involved even in the violence here.
I'm interested in the way that the center of gravity has been shifted and is being raised up so that there is this instability.
A way to drive this point home is just to compare this to a painting by Raphael from the High Renaissance, where we have an emphasis on stability and balance. The figures in this painting by Raphael are in the shape of a pyramid, which is the most stable of forms. There's a clear light on the figures. They're situated within this three-dimensional space. We can move from foreground to middle ground to deep background.
And Raphael is enjoying the opportunity to give us as much information as he can, not only about the three figures in the foreground, but about the natural world beyond them. Whereas Caravaggio is being much more careful about what we're going to focus on.
Look at that beautiful face of the Madonna. She's not a particular person. She is the divine mother of God.
But Peter is an actual individual that we're seeing. This is a particular man at a particular point in his life.
And there's dirt and clothes that are disheveled. And this is much more of the real world than we ever see in the High Renaissance.
So all of the art that we've looked at has been Italian. Can we see these same characteristics in art that's being produced north of the Alps?
We can certainly see it in the art of Rubens. If we looked at Rubens' raising of the cross, we would see a diagonal. We would see dramatic contrasts of light and dark.
What if we were looking at artists who lived in a Protestant context?
A lot of the characteristics we've been describing, these are characteristics that we associate with Catholic Baroque art that sought to energize believers. In Holland, we're looking at paintings that are very different than the altarpieces from Catholic Europe, and that's because we're in a Protestant country where artists are no longer commissioned to paint altarpieces for the church. So let's take something that seems like the opposite of the Baroque art we've been talking about. Let's take Vermeer's Woman with a Water Pitcher.
Instead of seeing a biblical scene, we're seeing a common domestic scene, a wealthy woman in her home in the north of Europe.
So what makes this Baroque?
Everything in this painting is quiet. The light has a subtlety to it that is very different from the drama and violence of the light that we saw in Caravaggio. Instead, the artist seems to be in love with the very subtle modulation of light, the very subtle gradations of tone. Look especially at the way that the light filters through her headdress.
Or under her right arm as she opens that window.
We see a woman surrounded by rectilinear forms. The rectangle of the window, of the map on the upper right, the rectangle of the table to the lower right. She inhabits that space between, but she's moving and resisting the stability and geometry that is set up by the environment around her.
She's picking up or putting down the picture, opening the window, this caught moment in between. And even the light has a sense of being in between, of the light coming in from the outside, of the light in the interior. And that interest in light is key to Baroque art, whether it's Caravaggio's drama or the subtlety of light in Vermeer.
This is a painting that is about subtle transition, and whether or not it's the subtle transition of the light or the subtle transition of her attention from the basin and picture to the window.
We are close to her. We feel as though we could reach out and feel that rug that covers the table. So that closeness that we saw in Caravaggio and Bernini is still here.
Let's move through all these different types of paintings. How do we recognize the Baroque in 17th century Dutch landscape?
Here's Ruysdael's beautiful painting of the bleaching grounds. But notice it's not an ideal landscape. This is the landscape of Ruysdael's hometown of Haarlem.
We call this a landscape, but this is really about those clouds. And look at those huge, voluminous forms that are moving across that sky. I can see them forming and unforming before my very eyes. This is still about transition. And look at the way that those clouds cast shadows that create these alternating fields across the land below. flow.
So Baroque art is about time. It's about effects of light, whether that's dramatic or more subtle. It's about involving the viewer, of moving into our space, of breaking down the barrier between us and the work of art. It's about the use of the diagonal, of a sense of energy and drama, sometimes subtle drama, but still drama.
And for me, it's always about a sense of direct relationship with the subject.
I really like that. I think that that is a beautiful encapsulation of this kind of discussion that we're working with, because the the idea is movement compared to static, and catching a moment in time. On the left, we have a Madonna and her dead son, very dead Jesus. This is an example of Renaissance work that is, there's a lot of detail, but she is in repose. She is in movement. And here we have the exaltation of Teresa, where we have an angel piercing Teresa's heart with an arrow, not to hurt her, but so that she feels energized with elements of uh, contact with heaven. And in this, we see the angel's arm moving. This is, and Teresa is moving. There's something happening, and we're capturing just a snapshot of energy. I think that this is a really worthwhile thing to watch as well. So hopefully, Colton, if you're not asleep, we're going to go ahead and watch this video as well. So please let me know that you
Two
can
of the
hear.
most popular time periods in art history, Renaissance and Baroque. Although the pieces often cover the same subjects, their styles are actually quite different. We're going to explore 3 ways to show these differences, so keep on watching
Okay, Colton, can you hear this? Okay, excellent.
to find out more. Before we get started though, let's refresh our memories on what the Renaissance and Baroque eras were all about. The Renaissance came first, lasting from around 1300 to 1550. For Western Europe, this signaled a rebirth. This was due to the fact that the eastern half of the Roman Empire was conquered by the Ottomans. Many scientists, artists, and scholars fled to the west and brought previously lost knowledge with them. In addition, archaeological digs became popular, unearthing classical art for the first time in centuries. Artists like Raphael, Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo were inspired by these developments and created some of the most famous art in history.
When your business
Sorry about that. It's the burden of the free video.
16th century, a new artistic style began to sweep over Europe. It was called Baroque, meaning complex or different. There is some debate on the actual reasoning, but these seem to be the 2 most popular theories. This period was marked by the Counter-Reformation, or when the Catholic Church used art and architecture to reinvigorate itself against the rising Protestant numbers. They hired artists such as Peter Paul Rubens, Caravaggio, Bernini, and Velázquez to create art that would celebrate the history and miracles of the Church in a way that would draw people back to the true faith. Now that we've established some background information, let's dive deeper into the differences between Renaissance.
Now, I do want to just iterate that the rationale behind these things, I don't know if anybody really understands the entire rationale behind the difference between the Renaissance and the Baroque. It does feel to me that the Baroque is rising out of the Renaissance and is a reaction to some of the principles that became very popular with defining the Renaissance. But talking about politics and reasoning behind it, I don't know if we can really be certain. What we can be certain, though, is that these movements were very different. So the thing to concentrate on with this um, video comes after the minute-and-a-half mark. And this is when we're going to start looking at what are the differences in composition, pacing, and movement between the Renaissance and the Baroque?
Renaissance and Baroque art. First off, these two styles utilized completely different techniques of composition. During the Renaissance, the goal was to achieve balance. Every detail was meticulously placed. This can be seen in Leonardo da Vinci's fresco, The Last Supper. He painted it around 1495 for the Church of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan, Italy. Christ sits at the center of the table, and the vanishing point is right above his head. On either side, there are 6 disciples in various states of shock. Behind the group are 3 windows, 1 large and 2 small, representing the Holy Trinity. Each element of this work is perfectly aligned to create a mathematical composition. In sharp contrast to Leonardo's work is Caravaggio's painting, The Entombment of Christ. This is one of his most famous pieces, and he created it between 1603 and 1604. Today, this work hangs in the Vatican museums. Caravaggio encompasses the tragedy and drama of the moment by creating a strong diagonal composition. The viewer's eye is drawn upward from the left corner, from Christ's dead body, to the men placing him in the tomb, and finally to the 2 Marys, his mother and Magdalene, who are mourning. The scene twists upward, creating a gradual unveiling of the story. In essence, Renaissance art used balance to lay the story out on the table, no pun intended, while Baroque art allows a story to unfold slowly as the viewer takes in the piece. This difference can likely be explained by the fact that the papacy, who commissioned Caravaggio's work, wanted to remind people of the sacrifices that Christ made on humanity's behalf. It was a calculated way to bring people back to the faith. Created in 1507, Raphael's La Belle Jardinière is a wonderful example of Renaissance Madonna painting. Although it was commissioned by a Sienese nobleman named Fabrizio Sagardi, this work now hangs in the Louvre. It features a beautiful young Madonna in a lush landscape. She watches over her son Jesus and his cousin John the Baptist. They are both infants in this depiction, though they still have their iconographic markers. Throughout the work, there is uniform light. It is soft and warm, speaking to a lovely
I'll pause that for just a second. Do you remember we talked about the iconographic markers are the aspects that artists use to communicate the people in their paintings, to communicate who the people are in their paintings. So we talked a little bit about that, that there are different colors that Mary usually uses, and there are different colors for each of the Marys. There are different things that the different saints will carry and use, different flowers associated with them. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about iconographic markers.
spring or summer day. It also symbolizes the holiness of the 3 figures. Their presence casts that light onto humanity itself. Although there are examples of contrasting light in Renaissance art, such as Leonardo da Vinci's Madonna of the Rocks, they are far less common. Once again, we are turning to Caravaggio for an examination of Baroque art. This painting is called the Madonna di Loreto and was created between 1604 and 1606. It serves as decoration in the Cavalletti Chapel in the Church of Sant'Agostino in Rome. In this work, the Madonna stands holding the infant Jesus. There is barely any identification, just a small golden halo. In front of Mary, there are 2 pilgrims. They have fallen to their knees in worship at the divine figures in front of them. Caravaggio uses light to his advantage to tell the story. The Virgin is partially shrouded by a shadow, adding to the mystery of her divinity. Her face is illuminated, allowing the viewer to take in her full glory. The pilgrims themselves are partially obscured by the shadow she cast, showing they aren't supposed to be the focus of the work. When shown side by side, the difference in lighting becomes abundantly clear. And once again, they tell viewers a lot about the motives behind the pieces.
I hope you can see that in this, the lighting seems to be a lot more even and formally balanced in this left one. This is the Renaissance. And in this, lighting is used to direct the attention of the viewer and increase the drama of the piece. And I think that that is a really valuable distinction between these 2 images.
In the Renaissance, it was all about classical beauty. The Madonna is fair and handsome, while the 2 holy infants are plump and adorable. In order to convey this, the lighting had to be perfect and even. But in the Baroque era, it was all about the story that was being told. The light was manipulated in such a way that it created a beginning, a middle, and an end. Essentially, it was made to be a restoration of a narrative. Our final difference between Renaissance and Baroque art is the utilization, or lack thereof, of emotion. And for this, we are turning to sculpture. First up, Michelangelo's Pietà. This is one of his earliest works, sculpted around 1498 to 99, and is housed in St. Peter's Basilica. The Pietà is one of the most common themes in art. It shows the Virgin Mary cradling Christ after he died on the cross. However, despite this tragic moment, in this work, both figures are quite serene. Mary looks down in reverence, and Christ could simply be sleeping. Rational calm seems to be a strange choice, but when you consider where the statue is placed, it makes a bit more sense. It was meant to be an aid in worship in one of the holiest places in the Catholic world. Gian Lorenzo Bernini, like his predecessor Michelangelo, was often in the employ of the Catholic Church. In fact, they commissioned him to create this piece. It is called the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. He sculpted it for the Cornaro Chapel in the Church of Santa Maria della Vittoria in Rome between 1647 and 52. To say this work is dramatic would be an understatement. From the left, an angel swoops down to pierce St. Teresa with his arrow. She throws her head back in both pleasure and pain. Behind the pair, golden sunbeams rain down. This sculpture tells a story, and an amazing one at that. It speaks to the mystical element of the Catholic Church, an excellent subject for the Counter-Reformation. Although both of these sculptures depict holy women, they are worlds apart. The Virgin Mary is the epitome of containment. Despite having just lost her son, she has no grief on her face. Her sorrow is buried within. However, St. Teresa expels her emotion with reckless abandon. She is the opposite of contained. The story of her ecstasy bursts forth out of the space and threatens to invade the viewers. Once again, we see the theme of rational knowledge versus a dramatic beckoning of the truth. Today, Renaissance and Baroque works are some of the most popular in the study of art history, and with very good reason. Despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, they are able to resonate with viewers. They connect with different parts of the human mind and our desire to understand the world around us.
Okay, I think that the important takeaway for this video is looking at the differences. Renaissance, very stable, very balanced, very formal, not an awful lot of expressed emotion. And Baroque, we get lots of these diagonals, three-dimensional excitement, uh, where this is almost a static event. With the Baroque, whether it's Italian or Northern European, we get a lot of just snapshots of time, moments of activity that are captured by the artists. And they are translated in different ways to different aspects of art, but I think that is those are really good things that demonstrate what the differences are between. I mean, those two videos are really good at showing what the differences are. And I wanted to show this uh, more with even some more images um, where we can look at Renaissance and Baroque imagery. This is very much a Renaissance type of thing. You get a lot of people, but they're just kind of standing around, which is not a bad thing. The architecture is very balanced, feels very formal. And I'm hoping that the images, yeah, we get Bernini's David again. This is from Baroque. See, the difference between him and Michelangelo's David is he is caught in a moment of action and excitement. He's caught doing stuff. A painting, another biblical story. There's a lot of activity, a lot of people moving and pointing and engaging with all sorts of different things. And the light is almost a narrator with a stick pointing at where you need to focus your eyes. This kind of painting is called Jesus on the cross, or a raising of the cross is what this is often called. There's also the counterpoint after Jesus has died, where it's the descent from the cross, where he's taken down. There's a lot of stuff going on. This looks to me like it's very Baroque, and it mentions that it is Baroque, where Jesus, there's a lot of muscle tone as he's struggling or moving around, even if he's not struggling. A lot of these people, there's muscle tone as they are straining to get this cross set up. We have a lot of energy with the diagonals and the light. And there's a lot of things for light to bounce off. There's really strong and dramatic shadows to help us go through and look at different aspects of the imagery. Now, I'm going to step away from that and look at architecture, Baroque architecture. And I don't have a lot of examples of um, the Renaissance architecture in here. So let me pull up an image of from Renaissance architecture, and hopefully you can see some of the differences. And we're going to see some of the same parallels. So here we have Renaissance architecture. You do have a lot of detail. You do have a lot of shapes and forms that are going on. What is interesting to me is that if we look at this, you know, we see a lot of detail. We see a lot of these things going on. But what's interesting to me is that it feels still very formal, very structured. If we go to the Baroque architecture, we get the same kind of, or very similar callbacks to Greek and Roman architecture. You have the Roman arches, you have columns, you have these kinds of things. But then one thing that I see in the Baroque architecture is we have these elements that where it just seems like they sculpted a lot of detail to engage your eyes that aren't necessarily vital to the structure of the building. And here, a lot of if there is extra detail, a lot of it is design work on the surface. You know, it's still relatively static. It engages the eyes, but it's relatively static. We go back to the Renaissance and we get a lot of this kind of this extra detail, lots of extra things going on. This, I'm sorry, this is Baroque. And looking at this, this is Versailles. Whereas in the Renaissance, this kind of design detail might be squares and different shapes like that with different with a contrasting color, like we see here. What is interesting to me is here you've got all sorts of extra stuff going on. We've got ribbons, we've got floral imagery, we've got all sorts of other elements taking place. Lots and lots of energy, just like we saw with the Renaissance or with the Baroque paintings. And here, I think this is a really good counterpoint. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at stuff that you weren't seeing. Forgive me. We're going back to Versailles, whereas these in Renaissance type thing might be decorations that have like the two colored squares and rectangles. In this case, we have lots of different ribbons and other forms, just lots and lots of stuff to energize your eyes as you look around. And I think that this St. Peter's Basilica is an excellent example of Baroque architecture. And what's interesting to me is that the structure of this is very similar to Brunelleschi's dome, which is very much a Renaissance piece. And I hope you can see the very strong differences between Brunelleschi's Renaissance work and St. Peter's, the Basilica in Vatican City. We have a dome that has a lot of these other things, additional elements added to it. The design is textural. There's a lot of different ribbons. There's a lot of different elements like that wiggling around and engaging your eyes. And here we see a lot of that design work as this contrasting color of rectangles. We don't have an awful lot of extra texture on the elements of the dome. We don't have a lot of extra physical texture around here. A lot of the design work is a contrasting color. And I think that that's really fascinating to me, you know, that kind of difference. And here we can see some ceiling painting. Again, lots and lots of people with lots and lots of motion. And this seems to be a moment caught in time. We look at Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling, and even though there's a lot of stuff going on, everybody looks like they're sitting still for a portrait. So, very much a different kind of thing. And even though that this is a relatively simple building by Baroque standards, again, you look at all the decoration on the dome and everything. We go back to Brunelleschi's dome, and you see a lot less of that extra physical texture. So I think that's really interesting. And here's something where this is labeled as Renaissance in this particular instance, but we just saw that this is actually Baroque architecture. And we can tell because all the different elements on the dome, all the different elements going around here, the textural components. I think that's really interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. I hit a button and my thing disappeared. I hope. All right. So Colton says you saw you can see that it's changed. Okay, good. And it would you say that those are fair kind of assessments that we're looking at, where the change is you have a lot of energy coming in, you have a lot of engagement with light and physical texture, uh, ribbons and movement, uh, having the artist directing somebody's eyes and then seeming to capture an active moment of time. Are those all things that you are noticing between the Renaissance that are specific to the Baroque type of stuff that we've seen? All right, good. You can see that as well. Excellent. Right now, I want to focus a little bit on sculpture, and hopefully you can see the same kind of stuff going on here. These are different things. This is also by Bernini. I think he was one of the most prolific designers and sculpting designers of the defining Baroque. And after him, a lot of people did the kind of stuff that he did. He's not going to be the only artist we look at, but I want to show some of this stuff. So this is Apollo and Daphne. This is a pagan myth. This is after a Greek myth. Bernini was heavily employed by the church, and he did other stuff too. And sometimes the pagan stuff that he did would underscore Catholic teachings from just a different perspective, and sometimes it would be opportunities for him to explore other worldviews as well. At this time, Greek and Roman thought is still heavily impacting and influencing the Italian Baroque. So some of the, even though this is a little bit more static than Bernini's David, you can still see these strong diagonals. Daphne is this woman. She's turning into a tree to escape the attentions of Apollo. You can see that she is actively engaged in moving. And a big hint there is look at how her hair is just flying around. And here it's turning into leaves and stuff from a tree. But it's obvious that she is in movement. And Apollo's clothing is whipping in the wind as he's trying to catch her. And it's also interesting to me that you get statues like Michelangelo's David. We have a popular view of it that everybody sees, and this a lot of the stuff is hidden. You can't see Apollo's left hand. You can't see Daphne's left hand. So you can imagine that if you went to the other side, you could see more of it. But if you look out to the other side, you wouldn't be able to see the stuff on this side either, because Bernini was very conscious of wanting to make the viewer feel like an active participant by engaging them to walk around the artwork. I think that's absolutely fascinating. This again is called the Throne of St. Peter. And here's the chair for St. Peter to sit on. But what's fascinating about this, again, we see all this activity. This right here, the dove in the middle and the light coming, and this represents the dove that was symbolic of the Holy Spirit descending on Jesus when he was baptized by John the Baptist. That's what this is referencing. But look at all these angelic ministrants around here. I mean, it's almost impossible to count. There's so many of them, and they're all in various stages of dramatic movement. There's a lot of energy going on, and I think this is a very indicative. Oh yeah, and Colton mentioned that, and right here, the hair of Daphne, the way it's positioned, you can see that it's whipping around, like we mentioned, and Colton mentions that the hair transforming into leaves is really fascinating, and you can see that very clearly here. Yeah, I think that is just incredible, and hopefully you can see a lot of the energy around this throne. It just there's so many of these angels everywhere, and they're all in different positions of movement. And even though these lines coming out represent sun rays and light rays coming out from heaven, yeah, they are static. They're only these essentially sticks or rods. They all have different lengths. They're all at different angles. And it seems to me that there's still an awful lot of energy just in something like that, a lot of dynamic form coming out. And here's another angel right here. Now this one is a little bit more sedate, but it still feels to me like the angel is caught in a portion of their movement. They're turning towards the viewer, and I think that's really interesting. So here we have Puget is another sculptor, Pierre Puget, and this is a Baroque sculptor. And it's interesting, we compare this to earlier sculptures we saw, even of the Roman sculptures that people had done, that the Renaissance was really in love with. On this, compared to Michelangelo's David, he has a lot more texture. This is the King David, not the young David. So this is an older David. It's interesting, his hair is rather dramatic. He's in the pose, he's dramatically moving, he's turning to his right. So he's not still like Michelangelo's David. You can see this texture of the tunic that he's wearing, the robe that he has. It looks like it's rippling in the wind a little bit behind him as he's turning. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And then this strap is not. It looks like it's worn. It looks like there's life behind it and history behind it. Now, this I think I really like Pedro de Mena, and the reason I like him, he was a Baroque sculptor, but he was in Mexico at this time. He was in Central America, and he does stuff that, yes, they're static, but you look at the face of Mary, and you look at the suffering of Christ. There's a lot more energy and emotion, even though these are static. It feels to me like there's a lot more emotion going on. They are a lot more dramatic. Can you see that, Colton, as well? It just feels like there's more drama in the face. And here's one of my very favorite of the Mexican Baroque sculptors, Juan Martinez Montañez. He was considered the god of wood, where his European contemporaries worked with marble quite a bit. Juan worked with wood. These are wood carvings, and then he'd paint them and he'd gilt them, and then they would be shipped to families and churches in Europe. But look at this, all the energy that's going on. I'm going to blow the painting up a little bit. So this is John baptizing Jesus. There are angels around. And even though this does feel a little bit more static than some of the stuff we've looked at, what is fascinating is that it is not the same kind of static placement of characters. John is stepping forward and he's pouring with a shell. This is a reference to the apostles and pilgrimage. It's a scallop shell. but he's pouring water over Jesus's head and baptizing him like this. But you can tell, you know, his arm is in one position. He's actively pouring. The water is coming out. The wind isn't whipping his hair or anything, but it is flaring out his sleeve a little bit. We can tell his right leg is bent as he's moving forward. The angels are coming down. Now, her hair is whipping out around a little bit. Jesus is very still, but still, he is not in a static posture. It feels to me like he's turning to his right a bit. I mean, he's turning towards us. I think it's fascinating. It is more subtle, but it still feels very much a product of the Baroque rather than the very static, very choreographed, still images. Oh, and Colton says it's very interesting that they made the angels' wings different colors. Yeah, the idea of, and you can see they're bright red with gilding here, and they're brown here on this angel. Uh, the idea, and they're green on this other angel here. It is interesting, and the idea that wings were white didn't start showing up until much more recently. Before then, you look at some of the really early Renaissance, even the angel's wings were different species of birds, and that would be one of the indicators as to what who the angel might have been. Because there in several Christian faith traditions, the angels can be identified by names and the orders that they belong to. They're called choirs of the angels. There are seven archangels, and there are 72 angels including the archangels, that help to govern the affairs of humans. And they each have different names, believe it or not. And a lot of them, you can tell who the angel is by the species of bird that their wings belong to. Not in this one. Mania's didn't work, or Montaña's didn't work a lot with that. You do see that though in some of the Renaissance and Baroque paintings in Europe itself, particularly in Italy. I think that's really fascinating. And Colton, it's really good that you were able to pick that out. That is not a common thing for most people to even notice. So we looked at sculpture, we've looked at architecture, and I want to look at painting, Baroque painting a little bit more. Now, Caravaggio is one that really, like Bernini, was pretty much the go-to standard for sculpture. Caravaggio is the go-to standard defining how people dealt with painting during the Baroque time. Caravaggio is the guy that came up with this idea of chiaroscuro, which is sharp contrast in the light way that things are lit. You can't even tell what the background is on this painting. I mean, I'm going to blow it up a bit. You can't tell what the background is. That is completely unimportant. What is important here is that Thomas and the apostles are identifying Christ, the resurrected Christ, by feeling the mark. This is the spear stab in the side of Christ. So these are really important paintings. You can see the nail print in his hand. How often have you seen Renaissance paintings where you see all these wrinkles on the forehead as people are gauging all their attention? There is drama, there is dynamism here. Oh, Colton, very interesting. Are you referring to what we're looking at now, or just the species of birds of the angel wings? Oh, the angels, yeah. I think it's really the angelology is really interesting, particularly with um, uh, Christianity hovering around Catholic traditions. Very, very fascinating stuff. Now, so we can see his finger, we can see the skin flare out as the finger pokes in. We can see Jesus's grip on Thomas as he forces his hand there. We can see all these wrinkles on their heads with these different apostles staring on. We can see that Thomas's shoulder stitching is coming unraveled. One of my favorite paintings was a conversion of St. Paul, because Saul was, oh, here it is. Here's the conversion of St. Paul. This is one of my very favorite paintings from the Baroque time period. What is so fascinating to me is look at the diagonal. We have these fluid diagonals. We have the moment of high activity that is caught in a snapshot of time. We see these incredible physical details of the people that, even though Renaissance work did feel very photorealistic, there's still there you don't have a lot of details of like wrinkles and different things like that. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not showing the right image. Forgive me. Here we go. Uh, we can see the wrinkles on the head of the drover. We can see the horse, the veins in the horse, and the hair that's dirty, in her mane. And here is Saul laid out flat on his, while he's being uh, converted, essentially. In this vision, he sees an angel that speaks for Christ and tells him, "Why are you persecuting me?" And it completely transforms his life. When Paul was known as Saul, he was a witch hunter. His first job was targeting witches for the Jewish community and making sure that they were punished. And then, as Christians started expanding, his job, he was hired by the same Jewish government to hunt down Christians. He was a Christian hunter, and so they could be punished by the law. And in his conversion, an angel speaking on behalf of Christ knocks him off a horse into the mud and demands of him, "Why are you persecuting me? Why are you persecuting Christ?" And it completely shatters Saul's worldview to the point that when he is baptized, he chooses to change his name to Paul, and he became the Apostle Paul. What is amazing about what Caravaggio is doing is we talked about how the light is dramatic and it forces your eyes. It engages you as a viewer to trace the light all throughout the painting. Again, you can't see the background. The background is completely unimportant. What you are seeing is the horse, and the horse is almost trampling Paul. And you can see that Paul is not paying attention to anything. See, the drover has the wrinkles on his forehead. He's trying to wrestle the horse down and calm her down again. What is really fascinating is if you see extreme close-ups of the painting, you can actually see dirt like here on Paul's thumb, dirt under his fingernails. You can actually see mud and crap and junk on his clothing, and just, torn clothes. And it just really makes the imagery, in addition to being entertaining and energetic, it makes the imagery very relatable, because you can see that these guys had lives that they lived in the real world, the physical world. Now, this is an example of Rembrandt, and this is an example of Baroque portraiture in Northern Europe, where they weren't as engaged with the ideas of the Catholic Christian stories. So remember, the subject matter is a lot more practical and business oriented in the North. They are part of the Reformation, where they will include biblical stories and biblical imagery, but the subject matter feels a lot more grounded. Now, what's fascinating to me about this is that this guy, Rembrandt, is completely different than Caravaggio, but he's still using light in a similar way. He's using light on the paneling to get you engaged in what's going on in the background. There's a lot of stuff going on here that makes it so that the background is not as important as this part, but there's still stuff going on. And we have a carpet here that's on over the table, and you can see that there is energy going on here. It's not formally draped. There's it's a little bit crooked, a little bit of things going on. And the guild that has their portrait being taken, all of them are unique individuals. And the coloring on all of them, it's not entirely flattering. This guy looks like he just got done with a bar fight 2 days ago. And But again, you have this very strong light and dark. So the darkness of the hats is used to help frame the faces. Darkness of the hair frames the face. We have the black robes and the white collars to again use light to direct you around. And it looks like they've been discussing something with a lot of energy, and they've been asked to just stop for a sec so I can take a picture. Even though there's low energy content, it still feels like there's energy there, and we're catching them between activities. I think that's really fascinating. And this is Rubin or Rubens. Uh, this is another Baroque painting. We see, we have happy, chubby babies. But what's some of the things that are different about this is that this baby's kind of wrestling. He's not, he's not interested in staying still. And the angel right here, or he looks like he's trying to give him something to shut him up or something. The mom is dealing with him. She's calm and controlled, but she is diverting her attention to the angel. She looks like she's relatable as a human being. She's just turned her hair. Her hair is whipping. Her hair is whipping up a little bit. And then Joseph is just standing here. You look at his eyes. He looks to me like he has not had much sleep at all. His little boy Jesus is really giving him a number. And I love that. And then you do have the background like you did in the Renaissance, but in this case, there's energy. It looks like the wind is almost moving the trees and stuff. So again, a snapshot in time, and light is used by the artist in the various colors and different engagements to move your eye around the piece. We have Joseph, you see his fingertips and his face. Mary, you see more of her. She's more important. You see a lot of him and quite a bit of the angel. And here is where we start seeing. So this is the tail end of the Baroque where we start seeing. Actually, this is smack dab in the heart of the Baroque. But in this case, we do see white wings starting to show up on angels. So and they do become more popular. That'd be an interesting project. Anybody who wants to take on that project, try to think about or try to share us the timeline of angel wing development. So here is crowning Mary the Queen of Heaven. We know that she's the Queen of Heaven because she's a woman and she's receiving a crown, and she's receiving a crown from, I believe that this is Moses, and this might be John. I'm not entirely sure who this is. But she has a blue robe and she has some red, and those are indicators too of who she might be. And then she's also wearing a hijab. This is a veil. This is not a Muslim painting. Hijab was not even predominantly for Muslims. It was something that Jews, then Christians, actually it was started with the Mesopotamians, but that Jews adapted and then Christians used from them, and then that Muslims used. But this kind of veil over a woman's hair, or around a woman's hair, is to remind you of her purity, her chastity, and her morality. And all those words are what hijab actually means. It means someone who is chaste. And then here we have the dove of the Holy Spirit, who is validating or verifying that she is receiving this crown from God. And these guys are just administrators acting under the authority of God, crowning her as Empress or Queen of Heaven. Now this Poussin is French, and this does feel very Italian because the shapes of the people and everything like that. And it does have a lot of resemblance to Renaissance work because people are really pretty static. But this is very much a Baroque piece. And some of the ways that indicate that is a lot of the background detail. We have a lot of detail in these trees. All the leaves are done and stuff like that. She does seem to be and just come here from walking. They are engaged, is pointing at something. He is in the process of turning over his left shoulder to talk to her. She is Sophia, or wisdom, and these guys are looking at something. They are in various states of movement. This guy looks like he's been static the longest. This guy looks like he's just knelt down. This guy looks like he's in the process of turning to talk to her as she's just put her hand on him. So yeah, this is does feel more static than some of the other things that we've looked at, but it still sits very firmly with the Baroque because there is still this movement. Notice that the background is a lot more dull, and we're still being asked to look at the different points of light. Light is being used to help us direct our gaze through the imagery. I think that's really interesting. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to talk about today regarding the Baroque, the differences. And I hope that you can see some of the main differences are level of energy, level of movement of the people involved, uh, the kind of detail. Renaissance was not interested in um, anything other than very benevolent emotions for the most part. We saw that one sculpture of David by Bernini. He's biting his lip as he's concentrating, he's scowling. And Caravaggio shows all the forehead wrinkles on everybody as they're thinking really hard. Um, the Death of Holofernes is another one by Caravaggio that's really gruesome, where somebody's head is cut off. It's another Bible story. And there are a lot of emotion on display, a lot of snapshots of movements. We saw the woman opening the window from the Northern Europe. And here it feels to me like the biggest difference between the Italian Baroque and Northern European Baroque is one of subject matter, where principal subject matter. Whereas you don't in Italian Baroque, you would have a lot of biblical figures in a group setting. In like the Dutch Baroque, you would have some very similar ideas for uh, concept, way light is used, placement of figures, but the figures are going to be in a textile guild or merchants guild, as opposed or the volunteer guard or the fire brigade or something like that, as opposed to a group of prophets. And I just think that that's really interesting. You get a lot of drama in the way that people are caught in movement. Like Colton pointed out, that as Daphne is turning into a tree, her hair is whipping around, and you see the leaves fluttering in her hair. Uh, I just think those kinds of things are interesting. And then with architecture, Renaissance, a lot of the texture, the visual texture comes through as design elements that are on the same plane as the walls, for example. And with the Baroque, you get a lot of additional elements that are on the surface. You get ribbons, you get fruit, you get other things like that that create the visual texture by creating an actual physical texture as well. So you can see the light and the shadow. So those are all really important distinctions and changes. And I hope that you were also surprised that there were woodworkers in Mexico who were Baroque sculptors that were in huge demand in Europe. The Mexican Baroque, we didn't look at music at all, and that might be interesting to research for one of your projects. But the Mexican Baroque in just music, there were some astounding composers here in the Americas, and the the wood sculptures that were made for Catholic consumption in Europe are just they're absolutely incredible. Now, when you paint on wood or you paint on stone in an art context, an art historical context, it's called polychrome instead of just painting. Remember, we like terracotta is the art history term for clay, and polychrome is the art history term for painting on stone or wood. So remember that, so that you can sound incredibly impressive for your next family dinner. Now, one thing I did want to talk about a little bit is I am not seeing an awful lot of projects coming in that people are doing. And those, the next project, project 3, is due this Sunday. So I hope people are working on that. And about half of everybody turned in their projects for their project number 2. As you have ideas for projects, please reach out to me and talk to me. One of the things that I notice is that some of you are hesitant on doing your projects because you don't think the subject will be really good or good enough to spend 3 to 5 hours on. I can always help with that. The other problem is you bite off a lot more than I'm asking you to chew. And that is that what I mean is that these projects only need to be 3 to 5 hours. They don't need to be 10-hour projects. So definitely look at the ideas that we did on the different projects, and I think we go to where to start. The challenge moving forward is the first assignment where we talked about different ideas for projects. And then if you go down to research and discovery projects and open that, then these are the project ideas submitted by the class. So go back and check that out and look at that with the different ideas, and please contact me. The problems that I'm noticing with projects that I hope everybody fixes, because again, you can resubmit anything you turn in and get more points. Some of the project ideas or issues that people are having with the projects are, one, they don't follow the guidelines for the different kinds of projects. And you have research and discovery projects. And I talk about what those look like. There's 3 different ways of doing a research project: as a PowerPoint presentation recorded with your voiceover and video format. And some people have gotten very creative with doing that because the technology is just not working the way we are told that it's supposed to. One of my favorites is people will have the slideshow on their computer, set their phone up in a little tripod in front of the computer, and just record a short video of them going through their slides like that. And that works perfectly. That's excellent. Another one is annotated bibliography, including 5 sources. That one, almost everybody who's done that has done a really good job of that. You do not need to have a separate thing that says, sources cited or anything like that, because you're sourcing or you're citing all your sources in the annotated bibliography itself. Again, it has to be alphabetically arranged. So each source, you follow the MLA standard for citing it, and then you write 2 paragraphs, and a paragraph is 3 to 5 sentences. And the first paragraph summarizes what you found out in that source, and the second paragraph is your reflection on what you learned. So that's what that is. And sometimes it's really helpful to put a 1 or 2 sentence introduction. And then the third is a cool PDF complete with 8 photos appropriately embedded in the document. This PDF, 5 pages of solid writing with 8 photos that are about 2 inches on the side. Solid writing, I mean 1.5 to 2 line spaces, for each line. You fill up 4 pages with the writing and the pictures, and then the last page is your citation list. That's 8 photos, no bigger than 2 inches, all right, embedded appropriately throughout the document. If you did this and you submitted a PDF with 5 pages and I said, oh, it's not long enough, for whatever reason, I was thinking the 5 pages of what you've written. What you've written should be 4 pages long, and then the 5th page should be your citation. So you should only be docked points if you wrote 2 or 3 pages and then did your citations, or if you wrote just enough so it looks like it should be a PowerPoint. So if you feel I've misgraded that, email me directly. Do not put a comment in the assignment itself because I won't see that. Email me directly and ask me to look at it again, please, so I can fix that, because I did not grade everybody's appropriately. And then this clarifies that. This clarifies a PowerPoint video. This clarifies the annotated bibliography. This clarifies your PDF. For the discovery projects, we are a little bit more flexible. And this, you should always have some sort of an introduction describing what you're doing, and then include pictures throughout the body of what you do. And the best ways to present your discovery project is a 5-minute or less video of what you did, either edited or time-lapsed. So you can do like a slideshow of photos that you took of your process, including your inspiration photos. You know, what paintings or what artwork are you looking at that inspired you to make whatever it is that you made? And then some photos of the process, and then you doing a voiceover of what you did. A couple-page PDF report complete with photos you took during the project, and you must include at least one citation of what you're doing so that it ties directly back to the material in the class. And you can also do a PowerPoint video with 5 images of your project as a slideshow. So for this, the one of the most common videos, these sound like they're almost the same thing. One of the most common videos, though, is going to be a voiceover of a 1.5-minute time lapse of you doing whatever it is you're doing. That is a really good video. And then you describe it, and then you edit it. At the end, you have a page that has your citations, or you include your citations on a separate document. So the most common ways that people have lost points on projects is, first off, if it's not associated with this class, and again, this class is Renaissance to Contemporary Art, so things after 1350, it must tie in directly to the class. And if that's not completely clear, it can be fixed. Several people have edited in an introduction paragraph which talks specifically about what they were doing and why it ties to the class, and then it's great. If I don't feel that it ties into the class, and I say 0, use it for a different class or something like that, and you feel that it does, that's a clue that you need to write in an introduction and explain it to me better. And that most of the time that works pretty well. And then you email me and let me know, hey, I redid the introduction. Another most common is that the file, I can't even open the file. You know, there's a permission wall and I can't open the file, you'll get 0 until the permission wall is removed. If the file is way too big for Canvas to access it, you'll get a 0 until the file is compressed, so I can't access it. Another really common one is that you didn't follow one of the 3 ways of making the research project or one of the 3 ways of presenting the discovery project. And the people that have done that incorrectly, I said, this looks like it would really work well as a PowerPoint presentation. And then they went back, did it as a video of a PowerPoint presentation, and it worked great. You know, that's usually all it takes. And sometimes the editing needs to be done where somebody's annotations, they sent me the second iteration instead of the edited one. So it's still unclear with poor grammar and bad spelling. And that happens every once in a while. All you got to do is just go back, find the most recent iteration of it, the most recent save, and send me that file. And if it's written so that it's confusing, I'll ask you to clarify. And all you got to do is clarify and then resubmit it, and you'll get a better score. I've also noticed that not everybody, after they submit their project, has submitted it to the discussion group. You get 5 extra points for submitting it to the discussion group so that everybody else can see what you're doing. And this is really vital. You need to have at least one citation, at least one thing. And please go through, if I do not mention that is in the, it should be in here. And if I don't mention it, please let me know. But that is something that if you are doing a research project or discovery project for anything, to tie it into the class, you've got to reference how you're tying it into the class. And one citation, even if it's a YouTube video, is what we need to tie it into the class. And I do mention that when we talk about the introduction, how it ties in. And I will go through and make sure that is very clear. One of the things I've not added in is that AI project I was talking with people about. That I will I will make that a separate thing that will be available starting on project 4, and it will be another way that you can do either research or discovery. So, and I will include that as well, and with an example. I'm sorry, it's not done yet. So if you do have any questions about why you didn't get the perfect grade on your report or what I'm requiring, sometimes several people are taking both 2720 and 2710. And if you submit one project to the wrong class, then you'll get a 0 until you switch it back. And it just make sure that that your project is firmly seated in the subject matter, the scope of our class, which is 1352 contemporary times. And you can go back to modules and look at the titles of the modules. There's Baroque, then we're doing the Enlightenment, Romanticism. Most of these are fully published. It looks like the Enlightenment is the next one that is fully published. I will go through and update all the dates on Romanticism, art movements, and going forward. So I will make sure that I update the dates on that so you have more full access. But if you see any of these titles, Cubism to the Color of Sound, Op to Feminist, Arts of the Concept, these kinds of things, you can, you can't, if you're confused at all, ask me a little bit about it, and then that will inspire me to go ahead and publish this whole thing so you have more stuff to look at. Or you can ask for clarification, and I can give you some things to look at if that's something that you're interested in exploring for future projects. So I hope going over this has helped to clarify things. Colton, have you found that helpful? All right, excellent, very good. So please go back over and double check things. What I would like to do is we have midterms coming up. We do not have a midterm test for this class, but do the best you can to get everything turned in that's already due. Get all that done so that you look as good as possible grade wise for the midterms, because I will have to submit stuff. And if you're falling behind, I know we have time to get caught up, but please email me so you don't lose points for turning things in late. You email me, ask me for an extension, you will always be granted an extension. And then when you turn things in, just remind me, hey, we talked, this is the situation. And I do not have any problem granting extensions. So I hope that has helped everybody. Next week, we're going to be looking at the Enlightenment. Between now and next week, I will be working on changing due dates for the remaining modules, so you can have access to all those and look at them. And if I grade anything and you don't agree with what I'm saying, please email me directly, either through the Canvas email or the campus email. Do not make a comment on the assignment itself, because I most likely won't see that until I go back and redo your grade. Please email me and let me know what concerns or thoughts you're having so we can take care of it. There is no reason that everybody can't get an A in this class. You turn stuff in, you turn the initial thing in on time, then resubmit as you make corrections, fix it all, and you can get a really good grade by the end of the term. So in the meantime, Colton, thank you very much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you. And everybody, please let me know your thoughts and responses to this video. If the two videos, in case the two videos that I shared don't make it into the YouTube video that is recording of this class for copyright violations, I will include links to them in the attendance assignment as well. So everybody have a wonderful week and weekend. I look forward to seeing you all next week. We'll see you.